Hi, everybody. Welcome to the September 7th Tinderbox Meetup and the 5 C's of knowledge management. How do we unleash our creative potential with tools for thought? Super excited to have today's conversation. Looks like we've got a light group today. We've got Mary Beth McCabe, Kenneth, and Paul Christy, and myself. Mr. Anderson and Mr. Bernstein are off to somewhere. I want to say Poland, I think, for the Hypertext conference. So they'll be talking about all things hypertext, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they have to come back from that. Typically, the way we run the format is we go around the room and we have new people introduce themselves. We have no one new today. We then go around the room and we have people talk about their projects or what they happen to be working on. And then if we have a theme, we jump into the theme. And today we actually do have a theme. It's a strategy for numbering documents and an outline and numbering tables and figures. So I was going to share some thoughts I had around doing that. Before we dig into that, though, anybody have any projects they're working on? Mary Beth had a great one last week where she got us all going on how to do slides in Tinderbox, which I thought was super interesting. Paul, what are you working on?
I'm continuing to I guess I'll say progressively elaborate my journal app that's entirely in Tinderbox now. I think I've said it before. I dithered about whether Tinderbox was the right tool for that for months and months after using Day One and the Brain and Obsidian and other things. Finally realized that the only tool that gave me all of the capabilities that I really wanted when I thought about my work and my days and my productivity was Tinderbox. And so now I'm 100% all there. If anybody says, hey, how can you live your life off of a Mac app only? The answer is you can do it really easily by watching folders in Tinderbox. And I do that by having a iOS shortcut that sends a little text to a file, and Tinderbox watches those files and uploads them to a daily journal. So it kind of integrates all of my work in one place and gives me the analytical capabilities that Tinderbox has.
And is that little snippet thing something you can share or show with us? I'm curious
Uh,
if you're open to showing that.
let's see. I can bring up shortcuts and show what I've got there. Yeah, if that
Yeah,
helps.
just kind of give us a sense of what you're doing to visualize it.
All right, let me shortcuts. I think is it showing up?
Maybe I have not seen the screen. Yeah.
Okay. So again, using iOS shortcuts on either an iPad, I typically use it on my phone when I'm in meetings or running around. I have 4 shortcuts I use regularly. I have one that takes my calendar events and throws them into a Tinderbox file. I have one that every morning I run and it grabs a bunch of weather and other data and puts it in a file, and then one that is just a generic, as you can see here, text to file. And I'll open that one first and again kind of demonstrate it. Text to file essentially hits me with a question box that says, hey, what's up, Paul? It takes that input, it adds the date to it, and then it throws out a text file to a shortcut text command, basically says save text to shortcuts. I'm going to open up to show more. And in iOS shortcuts, when you save a file, it sends it to a shortcuts folder in your iCloud online storage. And in my case, I give it a date, preface, and then the text that I've created above, which is nothing more than the output of my whatever I type in the "What's up, Paul" text box, and then it saves that. And I can also append to it if I get some more later on during the day. But typically, what happens is I just use the a short sentence or two to say something that to remember something that happened in a meeting or something longer, and then I'm going to jump over to Tinderbox here and show you what I do with that.
So
Did that show up?
So a couple questions. How do you trigger the shortcut? And is that something that's automated or is it manual?
It's manual as a shortcut because I trigger it. You can, I'm showing you on a Mac desktop, but if you were doing the same thing in the Shortcuts app on your phone, I make a desktop icon from that iOS shortcut. So it's on my main screen, so I can click it anytime. And when I click it, it brings up a box on the screen that says, "What's up, Paul?" with a text box underneath it. I just type it in, hit enter or OK, and it sends that to an iCloud file in a shortcuts folder, which I watch with my Tinderbox file and then just process whatever comes up in that.
Yeah.
So you could do the same thing with notes. You could do it with any application, but I find that just sending something to a text file gives me the most flexibility and least problems. And I'm only going to send plain text into Tinderbox anyways and do with it what I do. So it works out perfectly.
Cool. And then can we see, can you demonstrate it here or no?
Yeah. I just want to make sure, have I stopped sharing the shortcuts and now it's on my Tinderbox desktop?
No, it's
no. Okay, let me stop sharing that and I'll start sharing the Tinderbox file. Hang on, here we go. So you should be seeing a Tinderbox file right now with a bunch of months and dates on the left.
Yep.
Okay, so without showing any personal data, I have a journal file that has every year and every folder. Every year folder has month folders, and every month folder has day folders. And each one of those day folders is formatted in such a way that I see the month, date, year, etc. And then within each one of those, I show, for example, I'll just reveal today's. I show a log of what I'm doing. I show any work that I'm doing, and I transfer any events that are going to be on for that day. And then what I want to do is I want to pull in any data that I create from my shortcut. So I'm heading down here to a documents watched file, which is essentially a folder on iCloud, which points to the same folder that my iOS shortcuts throws files into, throws text files. And at the bottom of the list here, you will see today's info file. So I run this every morning. It grabs the day of the year, the temperature that day, the air quality, how long I slept. This is all my stuff that the iOS adds. If I got my weight in there, it throws that in. So I've got this text file that's being watched. It's read-only because it's a file finder watch folder. And what I do when I've highlighted this, as it's brought it in, is I run a stamp. And I'm going to just reveal this a little bit for myself. I run a stamp that I created mostly through listening and watching and following you, Michael, and others' ideas from the forum and from these meetups. But I run a stamp, a daily setup stamp, and that takes this file, in this case 240907 info, and it takes and does a stream read of all the data that you see right here in text format and assigns them to attributes in the Tinderbox note. And I can show the stamp if you'd like, but you can see when I go up and look at the particular file, it just throws up all the data. I haven't run it yet today, but it just throws up all the data for this particular stamp and translates everything that's in the plain text into these attributes.
Yeah, let's see the stamp. That is really cool. Okay, I want to start, and if you can share first show us the stamp, and then if you can go back to the shortcuts and share us how are you capturing that other data from iOS. That's really interesting.
Sure. So I opened up a new tab and I'm navigating down to the hints, the built-in hints where all my stamps are filed. And I've got a long list of stamps here because I do a lot of things here. But I'll just do a footnote. Michael, these meetups have taught me cool ways to stop using edicts and rules if I only run them very rarely, and instead move that into stamps where I can run them as I need it. And it just saves a little bit of processing time and less confusion because I'm more directed. So I'm following the stamp jargon. If I put a colon before a word, it aggregates all those stamps into one pick on the stamp listing. So I've got a bunch of them, and one of them is called.
I was right there. Can you go back up to the stamp menu and show people what that means? So when you show like
Sure.
process colon, process
Sure,
day.
you see all that list of 30 plus individual stamps here, which is in the stamp hints folder, but those collapse when I click the stamp pull down from the Tinderbox 10 menu, and anything that's got a colon after it aggregates that into essentially subfolders. So you can see I've got 2 agent stamps and they're collapsed under the agent pick, and it makes it just more easier to navigate through a long list of stamps by having them grouped together. I've got a lot of them under process because I process groups of notes. So under process, you can see in my stamp list, I've got process colon daily setup, process colon day, email, etc. But when I pull down the stamps menu, that just gives me, kind of a smaller list of grouped ones. And so when I click on process, it shows me all the ones that I can do in this case. So what I'm going to show you is the daily setup, which is what I run every day in Tinderbox to grab that shortcuts text file and put it into attributes. It's kind of not a really long, complicated stamp, but the ideas, of course, I got from one of these meetups, and essentially takes the data and takes the data as it's reading from the text and just creates different notes. So let me get a sense of what I'm doing here. Oh, I'm sorry, it's just the wrong one. I'm going to process the shortcuts info because I just took a look at some shortcuts info. So this stamp again takes that text file I created from my iOS shortcut, which throws it into a text file on Finder. Tinderbox is watching that file or that folder. I see something new and I run this stamp. And what it does essentially creates a bunch of temporary variables here. You can see the var. It grabs the file path, which is to find the day of the journal file that I'm looking for. And then it writes some log entries just so I can troubleshoot this. And then basically the stamp consists of this text loop, which goes, and for each line in the text field of that shortcuts plain text file, it looks at it, it does a counter or an individual counter called a line, and it looks for some occurrence of colon. This is a regex, of course, that looks for colon, and if it finds that it's a colon, then it grabs that file, and if before the colon it says readiness, then it puts that into a readiness attribute. Again, as each one of these said, if before the colon is AQI or weight or rainfall or high temperature, it just uses this formula, grabs the text from the particular plain text file that Shortcuts created and throws it into a attribute within a real Tinderbox file, which is my outline or my journal.
Mm-hmm. Sweet.
Any questions?
Yeah. So let's go back to your shortcuts then. Let's see if anybody else have any questions. I get it. Anybody have any questions about what he's doing here? And maybe you can demonstrate it for us then when you apply that stamp.
Sure. One thing that's incredibly helpful that I learned from these meetups, because when you're doing these things, you're always checking various things. It's so useful to be able to click on a file, right click on it and choose text window, and then just have that text window off to the side. I don't know if you could see that, but it's very helpful to do that shortcut. I'm going to actually show you two things, before and after. So I'm going to look at today's journal file. Sorry for scrolling around here. Tinderbox puts the today's file in bright green so I can always find it. But as you can see here, I'm trying to track my body weight, my readiness for the day. I've got a couple other fields here that mean something to me, whether rainfall is expected or high temperature. I like to track those things over time. And I get those out of that plain text file. So now you can see they're blank. I'm going to jump back down to that text file. Again, sorry for scrolling around. I'm going to run the stamp on this file, process it, and run my shortcuts info stamp. And if everything worked well, I go back up here and you can see that it's processed properly. It grabbed my readiness indicator, my AQI, my high temperature, and put them into Tinderbox fields. And you might say, why is this important? Why do you look at that? Well, and once you use Tinderbox for a while, you realize now I have the ability to use maybe attribute browser or the table view or any of the other views to just look at 30 days worth of high temperature or 30 days worth of my readiness. It really ramps up the ability that I have to kind of analyze what's going on in my life with this set of tools.
Freaking love it. So two things come to mind for me. One is a suggestion, and two is I want to look at your stamp on how you're collecting your shortcut and how you're collecting the data. But
Yep.
my suggestion would be for you, if you go down to the bottom of the list and go click on the note info.
This one down here for today.
Yeah. So one thing is, one idea comes to mind is once you might want to modify the stamp. So once you run it, it actually triggers a Boolean that says is processed or something like that.
Yeah,
So
that's a good idea.
And then what you can do is then have it strike through the name strike automatically happen and maybe change it to green. So if you want, we can go through that exercise and show you how to do that. But so that way, when the stamp runs, you know you'll have processed that.
Perfect. Yeah, because that's been a continual problem of mine, locating the right file.
Right. So so we can go and then the other thing too is I would to help you too, you might want to go down to the sort, or we can do one step at a time. Sure. So at the end of that stamp, scroll down to the bottom.
Yep.
Enter in after the last semicolon. Yeah, hit a new line. And so you can say like if lowercase if parentheses $ is processed. And we'll have to create that attribute in a minute. Double equals true. Okay, and then the curly bracket. Now, typically what I will do in this context is I would then immediately hit a couple lines and create another curly bracket and a semicolon.
Yeah.
Right. And we're going through, I know you know this, but we're going through it just to help it. So that helps people. You're immediately setting the appropriate syntax for writing that code. And then in there, you type in 3 lines like you did, and you say $ equals or $ name strike. I think it's straight, yeah. Equals true. Semicolon. And you might want to say $ color and hit a line. $ color equals green. Okay, and while you're at it, go back to that bottom semicolon, the last semicolon there.
This one?
Yeah, delete that. Type the word else and then another bracket. And then create your closing bracket there. No, create your closing one first, just so you got it. And then a semicolon. Now go back up. No, put the semicolon in. Put the semicolon in. Go back up.
Okay.
And then take the copy the name strike and color ones above. So that way, if it's not true, then you're resetting back to the default. Okay, go ahead and hit paste.
And then just take these out.
Take those out, and then and then that resets it back to the default. So it's often good, and then you might want to remove the extra space in front of name. It's often good to have that have the default aspect there as well. So now let's go ahead and create the is processed attribute. So if you go ahead and highlight the word is processed, hit Command 1.
Command 1.
Okay, go to the that one. Click on the Death Star.
Right here.
Oh no.
Oh, back here.
Right there.
Here.
Yeah, create new attribute. Paste that in, but you don't need the $, so you just type is processed. No, you didn't. I guess you didn't copy.
Yeah,
just
I copied the wrong thing.
Okay. All right, and then go back to your stamp real quick.
Right.
Okay. Now above the if is processed, put another line and says $ is processed equals true. Okay, so what this is going to do then is essentially what you've done is you've said run the stamp set the is processed to true, and then set your status settings. Okay, so now if you go back to your note, the last note on the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
And you might as well run it again because we'll just overwrite your data.
Voila.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Now
Beautiful.
the other thing, do you have a prototype for that note?
I do, yes.
So go up to that note, go to that prototype.
Right there?
And no, for the info notes.
No, I have no prototype for those. Those are just text notes.
Yeah, why don't you create one?
So they're in the watch folder though, so they're not a Tinderbox element, right?
Yeah, but they're still getting a prototype. So like right mouse click on it, see maybe the system's doing one.
Oops. Imported from Finder.
Yeah, I think they can still have prototypes.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like the prototype overwrote the name strike. So.
Oh, okay, got it.
So maybe that prototype is not available to us.
I don't know if it's a prototype or not. You go ahead. Import.
Oh, it's read only. Okay.
No, you can go ahead and change. Go ahead and change it.
So
see if you can modify the displayed attributes.
So like that, you mean?
Yeah, and go ahead and type in is processed.
Right? Okay.
Right, and then you can make it read only again if you want. Then you don't need to uncheck that. Right, so you can be modifying that too. And just out of curiosity, can you look to see if there's any edicts on that?
On this folder or on this prototype? No.
How about a rule? How about a rule? Is there any rules there?
No rules, no.
Okay, good. All right, so yeah, and what you might want to do is got it. What we might go back. I would do this then. Go back to the your stamp code.
Okay.
So I'm trying to think about where to logically put this code. So go back to your stamp code and take the whole if statement there. The if is processed. Copy that out of the way.
This one right here.
Yeah. Copy that all the way down to the end.
Even else.
Yeah.
For some reason, it's going out of my picture. Here we go. Okay, so X. All right.
Did you copy it or did you just delete it?
I copied it and deleted it at the same time. Did it Control X.
Now go back to the prototype.
All right.
And why don't we make that the edict of the prototype? So then that way, whenever the folder reruns,
okay,
yeah, it should make the color change for you. I think. We'll see. All right. So that's something to play with. We don't need to go through the details, but you get the general idea.
Yeah, no, this is really helpful because I've been looking for easier ways to make this helpful to me. Good.
Yeah, so that's one. And then the other thing I was thinking is you may want to change the sort of the list. So if you go back down to your list.
Okay. List of
the notes, the incoming notes.
Okay, so they're in documents.
On the documents, if you change the sort there and do it a reverse sort on modified date. And so that way the newest, just on modified date. There you go. No, it doesn't need to be reversed. So modified, yeah, do reverse sort. Right, reverse sort because you want the largest date first.
Yeah. Super.
That way you have the largest one on top.
Perfect. Perfect.
Now there would be edge cases and nuances where that may not make sense, but that's generally will help. You'll find helpful.
Yeah, lot less scrolling. Perfect.
All right. Can we see your stamp on your shortcut on how you're generating weather and all of that other stuff? Not the stamp.
Yeah. So this is the stamp code within Tinderbox.
No, not the stamp. The shortcut.
Oh, I hear what you're saying. Let's see. Yes, let's see. I think it's right here. Since I'm using a Mac instead of the iOS, there's going to be some unknown actions. But essentially,
We can't see it.
it's got these steps. You
We
know,
can't.
I ask for the
Paul,
weight.
Paul, we can't see it.
Oh, all right. Sorry. Let's see. I got to stop my old share, start a new share. How's that?
Yep.
Okay. So it's got typical iOS commands. You know, I ask myself just to type in my weight after I check my weight in the morning. It puts that into a variable, grabs the current date. Not sure why I add a day to it, but it does a bunch of things that I have done over time. So a lot of this stuff is just my own actions. Wherever there's an app that only runs on a certain platform like the iPhone, but since I'm looking at it on the Mac, it just calls it an unknown action. So what this does is it grabs the Apple Weather app and my Apple Sleep app, because I've got an Apple Watch that tracks my sleep. And it runs those and pulls some data from it. So it gets a value for the number of hours of sleep, puts that in an iOS dictionary file, time slept, grabs some more data, how much deep sleep did I get? You know, all this comes off your Apple Watch as a standard part of having the watch. Puts all these things into variables within the shortcut, grabs the current weather. I like to know the chance of rain and sunrise and sunset and the length of the day, you know, just various stuff. Uses some tools that reformat the day and date if I want it that way. And then the meat of it is I come down here and just create a text block which has all the things that I want to throw into Tinderbox, and they're separated by a colon so I can easily find them, and they have a descriptor next to them, and then the field that they've been created with within the shortcut, and then it, as the last one demonstrated, it just saves that text block to a shortcuts file in the shortcuts folder within iCloud, prefaced with the date in iOS, you know, YYY MMDD format, so I can sort them, called info, and that's the file that I process each day.
Okay, is there any chance? So can you start from the beginning though? Like, how does one? I've not done this before personally. So
Okay.
how does one pull in an app data? Like, how did you do that? Can you start a new shortcut and show us how that works?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Close this one. When you were within shortcuts, you know, this is on the Mac again, but you just click the plus to start a new file, and then you look for apps that have the capability to transfer data. So I usually do a search for it. I'm going to ask for input, so I just drag and drop that over in the shortcuts field. What text do I want? I want a number, and the weight is, you know, Paul, what's your weight? And it's just going to ask that question, take the data, and then it's going to do something with it. So set variable down here is in that list. iOS shortcuts is very cool because it using AI kind of thinks of what you've last asked and then gives you all the commands that might make sense at this point. So at this point, you can see the line between the two. So it's going to take the output of the ask command here and throw it into a variable. I'll call this body weight. And now I've got a variable called body weight, and it's going to run that. So you can test this at any time. Show result. Let's see. So I'm going to grab this. So, you know, the most simple kind of shortcut asks a question and gives you the results. So I'm going to run it. Paul, what's your weight? You know, 155. I'm going to say done. And then it shows me the result. It spits that back.
By the way, we're not seeing that because, oh, there you go. Now we're seeing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not seeing the dialogue pop-ups, just so you know.
Oh, okay.
Because
so that's the output of this. So what I do then is, you know, I just use various commands within shortcut to, you know, get date data. It has extensive amount of a number of date commands. You can format the date, etc. So I'll do that. I'll tell it I want the date formatted in a particular way. I like my dates formatted in ISO 8601, which is the YYYMMDD format. And then just throw those things into variables too, and then build up this data list from all those variables. Let me just make date another variable to demonstrate that. Drag and drop that over here. Now I've got a variable. I'm sorry, I'm going to do that. Set variable. Drop that in here. It's connected, you see, shortcuts knows to grab the last field. So I'm going to create a variable called date today or date run. Let's do that. And it's going to grab the formatted date and put that in there. So as I get all these dates together, what I do then is I just simply create a text file, and I can include anything in there. I'm going to create a variable called formatted date, and on the next line, a variable, right click on that and insert the variable body weight. And now I've got a text field, and I could very easily move show result down here and ask it to show the text. And if I run it now, and run it again, and now you see that it's created a text field called with the date formatted the way I want it and the text after it. Very simple way. And then all you can do is I do the last step, which is I create a text file from that and put it at the bottom. It grabs this text field and then writes it out. Is that helpful?
And how do you get the text field written out again?
So what I do is, let's see now, file. I'm going to type up here, what are all the different files? I'm going to save file. So down here, I'm going to just put save file. And that's a command that you can see. I'm going to get rid of this because we don't need it. It takes the output of this text block that I created with 2 fields, saves that text because it's the name of the variable. I'm going to click the show more, and I'm going to ask it. I'm not going to ask it for where to save. I'm going to actually tell it where to save, and I'm going to give it a slash. It's automatically going to put this file in a shortcuts folder in iCloud, which means it's automatically available on all platforms in the Apple ecosystem. And I'm going to call it, let's see, I'm going to call it formatted date. I'm sorry. I'm going to add a field called date, and I'm going to tell it I want that to be ISO 8601 format, and I don't need any time. So I'm good there. And then I'm going to put the text field. So click on that, insert variable, select variable. The variable I'm going to select is text. Looks like I need more space here. Now, for whatever reason, I'm running out of window space. There we go. I don't need this.
Now, shouldn't you be putting it in the sub path? Where's the?
So the subpath, putting it in a slash means add it to the end of the shortcuts folder, which is automatically created.
So it's creating a folder called shortcuts. Got it.
Right. That's all that automatically exists for anybody who runs shortcuts, and it's in your iCloud directory. And so you have access to that. Looks like I deleted something in here, but anyway, I would put the text after this. And then every time I ran that, it would create a text file with those fields in it.
I'm sorry, you put the text after what? What would you do?
Looks like I inadvertently deleted the text block here while I was typing. So let me see, text. There we go. They run up here. This belongs after text. All right. Good drag and drop. So you remember the text file was, I had the date.
Yeah.
And I got to recreate this. Let's see, 8601 ISO format, date, and I want to colon, or no, I want to space, and then just put another field, and I want my body weight.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what's in there. The date, I'm going to just give a name. It's going to preface this. It's going to put it's in the shortcut folder on iCloud. It's going to start with the ISO formatted date, and then I'm going to just put a new text info name after it. So now it's going to create a file called 2204-09-07 space new text info, and it's going to contain today's date and my body weight that I got from my
I guess that's what I'm missing.
dialogue.
How does it know to take the text information? Where are you specifying text?
Okay, so this is the text field, and I created a text field as a shortcuts command.
Oh, and now you're saying save this file. Got it.
Yeah, basically it just takes what's in the field called text and puts it down here. Actually, I want not that. I want to clear that variable.
Got it.
Essentially, it's going to take this text data, put it in that file. And the text data is an aggregation of fields that I've created up here, date and body weight.
All right.
It's the kind of thing where there isn't a manual for learning shortcuts that I've found. I mean, instead it's kind of drag and drop and learn as you're doing and make mistakes and start over again. But this is a fairly simple one, to just ask some questions and create some fields and then put them in an output file.
Yeah. Okay, well, I am thoroughly fascinated. This is really cool. I've never done that before. I'm going to have fun with that.
Yeah, well, you see various folks, I think you've done it too, Data, or Michael, how to use drafts or how to use notes or how to use those things on the iOS platform and move things over. I've played with all those and they have a great utility, but I found that most often I just want to get a sentence or a fact or something into shortcuts and then save it, and then later I'll process it in my Tinderbox file.
Yeah, I agree. And again, where do you find this shortcuts file that's on the...
So if you on your Mac, if you go into iCloud Drive when you're in Finder.
Yeah, how do I find that? I rarely use iCloud, so let's see.
So if you bring up Finder, and scroll to the bottom under the iCloud group of
we can't see your screen.
Subfolders. Okay, let me do that. Not even sure where this is. Let's see. I guess it's Finder.
That would be your iCloud Drive you're talking about, and it's in the so it should be on the left side on the pane beneath iCloud, on the view pane.
Oh, there it is. Got it. But I just
then your iCloud Drive, and then under iCloud Drive, there's a shortcuts folder automatically created, and within that I have all the output of shortcuts that I've run over time. Most of these are text files.
What's interesting is I don't have iCloud Drive. I wonder why.
Is it aggregated under,
No, I see
iCloud locations?
Michael, you might at some point have removed it from your left side pane. That's only anyway an alias to it. You will find the actual folder in your main user folder.
Got it.
So if you just go to the one that's your name.
Got it. Users. But how do you get it added back to, I mean, I can drag it over, but it doesn't say iCloud Drive, which is interesting.
So one second, in that case, do one thing, go to the library in your user folder.
Just go to Finder, go to Settings.
And even if you go to the top, to the Go in Finder, it's
Sidebar. There we go.
Shift Command I. It'll take you to iCloud Drive.
Got it. I got it. No, Tim Peterson nailed it. I needed to add this setting for iCloud Drive. Got it.
Oh, okay.
We're done that. Sweet.
Oh, thank him.
Okay, this is really cool. All right. I'm gonna have to play with that some more. Well, Mr.
Yeah,
Chris,
definitely pretty handy.
that's sweet. So I've been asking all the questions. Does anybody else have any questions? Art,
I can't think of any questions I have actually. I've been moving a few notes from one file to the other, which is relatively straightforward and simple to do. I did notice some kind of idiosyncrasy, but I need to look into it a little further, where the creation date seems to change when I move it from one Tinderbox project to another. And it's not the exact, it isn't like this moment if I drop it into a new file, but I'll look into that further and report. But no, otherwise, no real questions.
okay, that is just wickedly cool, Paul. You just wasted an entire afternoon for me to mess around. All right.
Well, you know, it's a productive afternoon because the outcome is you've got
Yeah.
something that can really be helpful.
No, I like it.
Are you saying you never use shortcuts, Michael?
No, I rarely use them.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, no, I've not found that burning solution, but this works. Okay.
Yeah, you find a ton of videos on YouTube as well on different tips and tricks and ways of using shortcuts. Of course, my personal feeling is that a lot of the public just use shortcuts for every darn thing they can even imagine. Like, set my AirPod volume. It's like you can almost do anything under the macOS sun with shortcuts.
Nice.
Yeah. You know, and a lot of people think that iOS shortcuts is going to be the successor or the takeover of Keyboard Maestro, that sort of thing. But, shortcuts can do a lot of things, but they can't do everything. So it's kind of a complement to the toolkit.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
One of the things is if you want to introduce a delay, like, wait 5 seconds or whatever, I think you can do that very easily in shortcuts, which you can't do with action code, of course.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So does I actually had another prepared thing to talk about today, but before we move on to, does anybody else have any comments, questions about Paul's stuff?
I came in late and I'm leaving actually in 10 minutes. I have work to do,
Okay.
but I missed it. But yeah, I'm going to look at the video and definitely check it out.
Oh, awesome. He was demonstrating how to take all that information that he captures in shortcuts, get it automatically into Tinderbox via watch folders, and then use stream parsing to populate attributes from all that data.
Oh, nice. So you used yeah, great chain of activity. Love that.
It basically automates the context of his daily journal.
Yeah.
That's excellent. I found when I'm ingesting stuff like say from say Obsidian via watched folders, sometimes I'll play around with it in Obsidian because I may want to refine it or I may want to add to the text. So I always do that manually, and only then I feel okay, now it's ready to pick up in a watch folder.
Yeah, but I think you can do the combination between his shortcuts temp folder and the Obsidian temp folder, and then find ways to merge that together.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
I can totally see that. Yeah.
Right.
And Obsidian is something I played around with a lot, and they do some things that are really cool, like the way they handle markup text. And it's a nice editor to write in, but at some point I had to make a decision. Do I want to learn JavaScript and the data view model very intensely, or do I want to continue with what I know in action code in Tinderbox? And I decided on the latter because it's so much more productive for me.
Well, I again though, I hear an or there in the way you're presenting that, Paul, and I think there's an and.
Okay.
And the and being that I like you don't want to learn Obsidian's version of action code, because I don't want to learn. I don't want to get into writing JavaScript and doing all that. You can do all of the Tinderbox like stuff we do, but you need to really kind of know JavaScript and more advanced programming capabilities to do that with an Obsidian.
Absolutely.
However, I found Obsidian to be, in my 5 C's of knowledge management process, collection being the first C, I find Obsidian being by far the best cross-platform collection tool there is. It's just absolutely fantastic.
It is so true, and the sync works so beautifully that basically, if I have a thought or an idea and I capture it on my phone, I can literally walk to my laptop 5 seconds later and it's there.
Correct, and it's in your Tinderbox file. And then
And I use
and if you recall from a couple weeks ago, we did the Obsidian what do they
properties.
call it? Properties feature, where just like you're stream parsing shortcode variables, you can be stream parsing properties
Yeah.
out of Obsidian and then get those in there. And so if
Yeah.
you start thinking about Obsidian as kind of this like very quick concept capturing tool, you can do the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
It
can see
really,
that.
really works. I'm sorry, Art, I cut you off though. You were saying?
No, you were saying we were pretty much saying the same thing. And if you just consider it from this perspective, like with as far as Obsidian goes, I don't use the data view. I think that's way too confusing and complicated. And also, I really don't want to start formalizing my data until it's inside Tinderbox. So
Right.
all I literally need is the properties, which saves me time. I don't even need the properties. If I write there that I timestamp of this note is XYZ, I can pick it up in Tinderbox using stream parsing later on. So you need to use it actually minimally. I think 70 to 80% of the videos you see on YouTube to do with Obsidian are just so over leveraged, and so much of it is sort of repeating in a very minor way what Tinderbox is already capable of doing, and where your learning is already now will come to advantage. So
Right.
I sort of get in on the ground floor. I get off at the first floor, and boom.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really encourage you, Paul, to not throw the Obsidian baby out with the bathwater. I mean, it is an awesome front end tool. The other thing about it is if you're, and this is where it's something that I stumbled across, is if you're copying rich text from like from a Word document or even from the web, Obsidian will automatically turn that text into Markdown. So if you have heading 1, heading 2s, heading 3s, Obsidians will do pound, 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 pound for the 3 headings. If it's a URL, it will automatically convert that from an RTF URL into a Markdown URL. So that I found I'll go to websites and I'll scrape like 5 or 6 hyperlinked menu items, paste that into Obsidian, and I automatically get all the URLs. I don't have to right mouse click to copy the URLs.
I think.
Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to say, my problem when I get into Obsidian is I try to use it and set it up or kit it up into a complete personal knowledge management system. And what I'm hearing you saying is stay away from that and instead just create notes and use it as a place to store information that you're eventually going to watch and drag into Tinderbox.
Correct. So for me, the only thing Obsidian does for me is it's my front end data collection pipeline. All of my front end data collection, and I shouldn't say all, the vast majority of my front end data collection, every call, every meeting, quick thoughts and quick notes. First thing I do is I dump it into Obsidian. I'll add appropriate properties to it. Here's who I talked to. Here's the name of the meeting. Here's the project it's related to. And so I can capture all of that very, very quickly in Obsidian. And then it just sits there. And then if I want to, if and when, to Art's point, if and when I need to process it, honestly, 90% of the time I don't. But if I do, I can then pull it into Tinderbox and then have Tinderbox render it.
Say you're on a phone call and you're just like talking about stuff and you have a few extra seconds and you have an Obsidian note open in front of you. You make the notes and you utilize what they have called properties, and you just, while you're doing it, you go, oh, priority is high, or needs to be done by Tuesday. And while you're talking, little bits and bobs come up, and then so those are properties that are sealed in now with your note, and you just go to your Tinderbox, use watch notes, pick it up there, boom, immediately become attributes.
Right, and then the nice thing too is once you've been, I'll demonstrate this too. Once you've been using Obsidian for a while, it actually kind of remembers the values of your attributes, which are of your, I keep calling attributes, of your properties.
Yeah, that's kind of weird too.
Which is really really helpful too. So I can show you this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there goes my afternoon now.
So if you and there are some things to to make Obsidian like plugins. Obsidian has plugins that are helpful too. But you'll see here, I'm already pre-writing my notes for my Tinderbox post-call meeting. Like, so for example, if I had previously done this, so what's the program? The program is, if I type in the word Tinderbox, the program is Tinderbox. The project is a Tinderbox meetup. Here are the people that were involved. I'm starting to capture the keywords that are coming up with the notes. Here's the agenda. Here are some tips that you've been coming up, some journaling apps that you've talked about. So I've gotten getting all of that stuff that I just as we're talking. And I'm not worried about it being clean. This is here it's marked down, so this is going to become my reference section. And so later I'll go down and grab the URLs for those apps, and I'll be able to throw that in the post.
Yeah.
All right. So it's just a really fast, and then because it works on iOS, it's on a tablet or a phone. It's wherever you're at. So my Obsidian app is always sitting next to it's always on the right side of my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you don't need to pay for the Obsidian sync. I'm just thinking of my vault is in the iCloud drive, so it syncs really well. I'm also going to add a double point here is that it's probably understated, but because Obsidian allows you to set themes, you can actually set a user interface that works for you very easily. Now, you notice Michael has a certain theme where his H2 headings and his H3 headings are different size and a different color. The background is a specific color. And there's probably 500 themes available or thousands of themes available on the Obsidian community sites. So you can get it to look exactly how you want it to. And
yeah, that's the Dracula theme, by the way.
okay. Yeah. And if you're familiar with, say, an app like Things or OmniFocus, there's somebody out there has written a theme that makes it look exactly like that app that you're so accustomed to. So, which is a quick bonus. There's another thing in Obsidian that I would highly recommend looking into, which is called templates. There's a community plugin called Templater, which is very, very useful because it allows you many things, but the thing which I'm thinking about right now is say you set up a folder in Obsidian, which is going to be your watch folder in Tinderbox. And you can set it up in such a way that anytime a note is created in that particular folder, that it will automatically inherit a particular template.
Right.
So which means like in the case of Michael's example right now, the Tinderbox Meetup thing, the moment he created a new note, it would already have all those properties laid out and set up for him. Or you could have data pre-filled into it, which is a huge time saver.
Yeah. And then you pull that right over into Tinderbox.
Exactly. So of all the plugins that I might recommend in Obsidian, I would say tasks and templater are really the two most powerful I've used.
Yep. All right. So if we're done with that topic, if you want, I've been experimenting with how to do auto numbering of items and auto numbering of chapters, sections, and figures. And I mocked up a little demo for us to do. And I whipped it together this morning. And as I was doing it, I started thinking about another concept that I want to raise to you. So if you guys mind, if we can spend the last 34 minutes of today's call, I can walk you through kind of this prepared methodology that I proposed. We good with that?
Sure.
Okay. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. So the objective is, and I'll share this document later, but so the kind of, I've got a growing README, but the objective of my project was, automated chapter and section numbering, automated table numbering, automated figure numbering, and automate cross references. So that was my methodology, or the kind of the goals and objectives I had of my project. And what I mean by that, and let me go ahead and create a separator here just so it helps. What I mean by that is organize this a little bit, is that let's say you had a document And in that document, you wanted to be automating, like, this is chapter 1, this is section 1.1, this is chapter 2, this is section 2.1, right? And you wanted that process to be automating within your document. So, and then once you've done that, you then would say, okay, well, I also now want to be able to say, when I'm looking at an image, this is image figure 1.1.1. And then whereas if that image was somewhere later in the document, that would automatically be figured image 2.1.2. Or if I go down here to this one, this is figure 1.1.4 or 1.1.2. And I'll show you some thinking I have behind that. But that's kind of the thought processes that I wanted to show you. But what was interesting when I was coming up with this demo file this morning, I had a blank Tinderbox file open, and I started saying, okay, well, let's start the process of making this happen. And so I said, okay, let's start with document. We lost a lot of people today already. Let's start with document, and then what do I want? I want chapter, and then under pages, page. Sorry. And so then I was kind of thinking about, how do I want to set up this demo? So I was going to copy these items here. And so then I'll go like this. Right. And then these would drop in here. And then now I'm like, okay, this is getting interesting. So let's pop over to outline view. So now I've got my document. And so then I'm starting to think, okay, now I want to start, if this is the general structure of my particular document, and then I also I'm actually going to want to have sections in here. Right. So I was kind of brainstorming, like, what's the structure of my document going to look like? Like that. And so since I've done that, and this is just delete that one. Do that. Set down here. And so now I have kind of the general structure of what I want for a document. Now, as I was going through that, I started realizing, well, wait a minute, there's a lot of knowledge that I'm bringing to the process of creating the document I'm about to demonstrate to you. And so some of that knowledge is like considerations, the general concept of the 5 C's of knowledge management. The idea of what I call the CSA separation process, the concept of separating your content from its structure and appearance. This idea of staying close to your content. Other ideas, embracing the manual friction. Embracing manual friction as being something important to the process. Automation, refining your personal workflows, reusable assets, incremental formalization. Other concepts that were coming to mind is, if you want to get better to, learn something, you should try to teach it. Keep a record of your change logs, much like what Paul's been doing. Other things that came to mind as I started documenting the different actions I needed to use, or the different functions. The attributes I was creating, the utilities that I use to facilitate my work, the languages that I'm leveraging, the terminology. So this is all of the terminology as I was developing the demo this morning that was that came to mind as as we were thinking through this process. And then finally, kind of some tips and best practices that would be good to be doing, and then like my punch list of things that I want to be doing later. So as I was going through this and thinking about, like, how do I want to show people what I'm doing, it became it really started dawned on me, like, how much knowledge gets generated and collected, and that one develops as they're kind of learning this tool, this process of knowledge management, and this thing called Tinderbox. So then I think, as I was then incrementally going through the process, I started developing all of these different types of prototypes for this type of project. So you've got documents and chapters and sections and pages and attributes and folders and media files and tables. that you have you're involved, and then invariably you're going to have some templates. So as I was going through the process, so let's say, I'm wanting, and I'll just copy and paste back and forth between these two documents so we can experiment seeing it from scratch. Let's say now, so I now generally have my structure. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the menu and add the prototypes folder from the file menu. And I'm going to start creating the prototypes that I know I'll want for this document, like P document and P chapter and P section and P page. Okay, so so I basically have those different elements to it, and then I start thinking about, okay, well, what do I want like my documents to do, and what kind of attributes do I want? And so then I'm starting to think, well, what I need for a chapter is I need the chapter number. Right, so I need that chapter number, and I'm going to go ahead and create that as a number. So I've now got that one created as a number, and then I'll think, so then I'm also going to need like a number section, right? So I'm going to create that. So I'm just going to you just kind of go through the process of incrementally, generating the various attributes and the various elements of the document that you want. And then I think, okay, so now let's go, and then I'll go back to this demo file I wrote this morning. Now, did I do it in edicts or did I do it in rules? Oh, I didn't do it in document. Okay, so now let's look at the chapter. So when I have a chapter, well, what do I need to do? Well, I need to, and again, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to tell Tinderbox, understand the context of, let's take a step back. So what I need to know is I'm thinking about numbering. I need to know that this section needs to understand its context, that it's inside this chapter, versus this section that needs to understand its concept versus this chapter. And what's also important to know is remember one of my core considerations is the CSA separation, right? So let me demonstrate that in action. I could name this note section 1.1, right? But I don't want to do that, because if I name the note section 1.1, I'm prematurely formalizing the structure in the name of the note, because I don't know if this note is going to stay in that position. The odds are it won't. The odds are I'm going to move it, right? So I don't want the note prematurely formalized with a particular name. Does that make sense? Paul, you nod my head. You're agreeing with me on that one? So I try to keep my content even down to and when I say content, I'm saying all of the values of all of the attributes, a note name, a note's text, any of the values of an attribute. I want it as pure as possible from any concepts of structure and appearance. So that's why this note can be named AAA, and this note name could be A ... Doesn't matter. What matters is the context to where it is within the outline. And so that's a really kind of critical thing to grok, is this issue of premature formalization. So I'm going to add that to this idea of incremental formalization. So we all have another concept of premature. Another critical concept that we need to have in these ideas. And so as I was developing this file, just like I just did, another concept came up. I'm going to drop it in there. So I was actually developing my kind of teaching, learning materials too, as I'm building this file. And so then, how do we then go about getting this, and so then I also want to have a string variable that would, produce the number. So let's talk about how we go about getting there. So if I am in a chapter, what am I going to do? And for the purpose of I would do this for my files, I do this in a different way. But for now, all of what Paul was talking about is using, getting stuff into stamps and using on visit and all of that. But for the purpose of this demo, I'm just doing it in edicts because that automates the triggering of the code. So you'll say, is prototype equals false? Well, the reason why I say is prototype equals false is I don't want this code running on the prototypes. Because if the code is running on the prototypes, then that could change things upstream. So I say is prototype equals false, and then I just set the chapter number. And again, I'm manually introducing the friction of needing to manually enter the chapter number 1, chapter number 2. The reason why I do that is often I will have files like readmes, things like that, that may not even have a prototype. And so I'm not automating the numbering here because I actually have no idea if I'm going to have extra notes up there or things thrown up there. So I'm not going to be leveraging like sibling number or outline numbering or anything like that to auto number. In a book or in this type of project, it's there's only going to be 5, 6, 8, 9 chapters, so I can manually handle relabeling 8 numbers. That kind of context is fine. I then say, all right, let's go ahead and now create now if you think about here too, look at this. The name of this node is A, the name of this node is B, but what you're visually seeing on the screen is something different. And so what we're seeing is what's called the display expression. So Tinderbox has this ability to say, display something different than the actual name of the note. And that's important for me because I've got note A here, but I want to actually understand and see its context as an author. And so I see that as section 1.1.a. So the way I go about doing that is I create a variable called display expression. And I go into Tinderbox and I say, hey, Tinderbox, make the display expression equal to whatever the value of the attribute display expression cache is. So when I do that, then I can then go here and say, I'm now going to set display expression cache. We were on chapter at that point. So if, and I have a Boolean here that says is chapter. So if is chapter is true, I want the label to be the word chapter plus the chapter number. And then I want to say if no show title equals true, which I'll show you in a minute, I want the display expression to be the label plus no show title, or I want the expression to be the label plus the name. So the reason why I do no show title is there's sometimes in my documents, I don't want to show the title of a note as I'm publishing. So if I go ahead and do that, you'll see Tinderbox has automatically said no show title. And so this visually tells me that when this note publishes, this title won't actually show up in the output. So that's a little trick I built for myself in my templates. So that's one idea. And then you'll notice now I'm seeing the chapter 1. So if I go up here now, and so this display expression is being generated by this action code to set the value of the display expression, and then based on what I put in the display expression, whatever the value of the display expression cache is, will become the display expression. And the reason why I do this is because you can put action code in display expressions, but I find it so much easier to be writing my action code in stamps or in other aspects of the application than messing around with it within this little dialog box within the utility. So I've now gone ahead and managed setting my display expression. So I do that same thing for section headings as well. And I don't do it for pages, or I in my book I do, but in the context of this demo I don't. So now you're seeing this is and essentially then what I'm doing on sections, I'm saying is prototype equals false, the number section equals the sibling order. Now there's an attribute in Tinderbox called sibling order, and the sibling order is the ordering of the numbers in containers. So this is sibling number 1, this is sibling number 2, this is sibling number 3, right? And if we want to go view that, we can go to view columns. And sometimes that helps. I'm going to say sibling order. And this is a system level attribute in Tinderbox that's showing me these are my siblings. So you'll see in document, so in this context of the folder, at the root level, this is item number 1, the separator is number 2, document is number 3, this is number 4, this is number 5, and turn to siblings. Now if I open up my document, this is number 3, but in document, this is number 1. This is number 2. And within the chapter, this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3. So I can use the sibling order that Tinderbox automatically produces for me to help me with my numbering schema. So as I'm thinking through my numbering process, if I know this is chapter 1, and I know this is sibling one of chapter one, then I want to include it within its numbering scheme. And so if you go, and then if you look here, if I move this, which is now currently 1.2 to 1.1, and then it refreshes, you'll notice that it automatically updated because it took the sibling number. I got a new sibling number. No, I'm going to overwrite that and automatically do that. So if you look down here, it says is section equals true, make the label section plus the section number string. And the section number string is getting produced up here. The number of the chapter, which is from the parent. So the parent of this note is chapter one. And then grab me my section number, which is my sibling order. So I'm able to now construct that. So that's how I'm able to now order my my section numbers of the document. Now in my own files, I have a significantly more complex, nuanced way of doing this. So when you actually get, when I would argue when you get into the kind of a real world example, there'll be some little tweaks you want to do there, but the generalized framework shows you how to for doing that. And then when you think about your output, you then can go into your template and say, you know, if is yes include number equals true, then show the value of the numbering system or not. So watch this. If I'm here and I want to look at, I'll do it down here. If I'm here and if I want to look at this chapter and these outlines, you'll see I've got do this one. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, the output number, that's funny. Why is it doing that? This happens sometimes when the HTML file name Oh, okay, interesting. Okay, so here's what's happening. So in Tinderbox, so let me first demonstrate. Let me tell you what I see happening, and then I'll tell you what's happening. So you see here I'm on chapter 2, and I go to preview the note, and it's jumping all the way up to chapter 1. Art, do you see that?
I do.
Okay. Now let me tell you what's happening there. The reason why that's happening is this note is named chapter, and this note is named chapter. And in the output file, when Tinderbox is previewing notes, it's publishing the paths of the note names using the note names to the hard drive. And so when Tinderbox is previewing, the preview is looking for the file name named chapter. Well, this one's named chapter 2. So it just happens to be grabbing the first one. So in fact, what I
didn't understand that at all.
Okay, so let me show you. Let's change the output directory of this folder. This is actually a really important concept, so I'm glad we stumbled across this. So let's go to my desktop and I'll drop this on. We'll go here, new folder. We'll call it test file. Okay, so I'm specifying the folder I want Tinderbox to be outputting documents to.
Okay.
Right.
And you're specifying that in the template, or?
Yeah, I'm specifying that in the inspector.
Yeah.
I'm going to the inspector, export, and I'm saying export to test file.
Okay.
Okay, do you see that?
Yeah.
Now if I go to my desktop and I find the folder test file that we just created, you'll see that there's nothing in here.
Sure.
Okay. Now watch what happens when I go and preview. Let me just preview one note so you can see it. Now I'm going to preview this one note right here. It's now created a folder called README, punch list, the name of the note. So Tinderbox is creating the path to that note, just like any web. This is this is Web 101 architecture, right? So now watch me go here. I'm going to go ahead and preview this note. So it's created the document, document chapter. Okay. Now watch this. I've got this other note called chapter here. And when I try to preview this, what Tinderbox is doing is it's going, oh, I'm going to go look at my my output structure and go grab the file name chapter. And it's grabbing the first one named chapter, and that's why it's showing that. If I were to change this note to chapter 2 for now and preview it, you'll see now Tinderbox is creating a note called chapter 2. So so this is an interesting idea. So in the context of Tinderboxing, we'll often say that the file name can be unique. And that is true when you're interacting within Tinderbox. But when you start going to export and you start getting nuanced with your export, the file name can't be unique. Because HTML looked for unique file names to be able to resolve the path to that file, the preview.
Right.
Okay.
So it's going to add the 2 on it, basically, is what you're saying.
No, I'm not, because I don't want to put structure in my note names like we were talking before.
Yeah.
Right. So what do? What I do, and this is a little hack that I figured out, is at the end of the day, I'm never going to really read this HTML output structure. So I don't really care what its name is. I only care that the name is unique.
Got it.
So what I do is in my code with all of these, I tend to, in every one of my files, I add this line. HTML export file name equals ID, right? So I add that I add that to all of my files. So whenever my files are getting exported, right? So whenever my files are getting exported, rather than the name of the note getting exported, what gets exported is its and I didn't do it on section. Did I not do it on section? Just a minute. Oh, the code's got to run. Sorry. Yeah. So let's give it a chance to run. So you see now that the let me go and the edicts get triggered the second you touch a note. So sometimes what I'll do too, if I made a big change like that, I'll just quickly run up and down the file chain to just touch them every quick, and that will trigger the edicts. So now when I do that, if I go to preview that note, like this note B, you'll see my paths now are the file numbers.
Yeah, that's makes more sense and is easier to track. But I'm a little puzzled, sorry, just to pull you one step back. Does it always happen when you touch a note or a container in preview mode that is basically sort of setting up an export? Maybe in fact they're not doing it unless
yes. From Tinderbox 9.5,
okay,
whenever you preview a file, Tinderbox automatically pushes that file to the hard drive, and that's because of, if you recall back a couple years ago, Mark made a massive regutting of the back end because of Apple security issues.
Okay.
And one of the implications of that was preview files have to be dropped on the temp directory, and he had to isolate the files from the structure to adhere to Microsoft or Apple security issues.
I see.
Okay, and so now you'll see my file name, my export file name is the ID number of every one of my notes. And and if you noticed in a new Tinderbox file, if I happen to open up a new Tinderbox file here, you'll see that that they use temporary folder. So by default, every new Tinderbox file, Mark's got a temporary folder in the background. And occasionally he cleans that out and it gets deleted for you. But if you want to be really nuanced with what you're doing, you can actually specify your file and actually see, like I put on my Finder here, the actual file structure and what's happening there.
But sorry to interrupt you, but like I was in that window, and it actually defaults to stating none. But if you look at the export template if you create a new,
oh yeah, no, I said export to the file directory. The template is none.
But I was in Tinderbox and I opened up the export pane just as you have. and when I opened it up, where it says now test file, it said none.
Yeah, because you haven't done anything yet. As soon as you take the first action,
Mhm.
like preview a file, it will
Mhm.
populate that value.
No, I previewed the file first, and it still said none.
It should say, let's see, let's open up a new file just real quick and see. Go to Tinderbox, and then I got a couple other things I want to show you before we end. So if I go here, I've got a note, got another note.
Mhm.
Got another note. Let's say I want to preview this note, but before I do, we're going to look at what's there. So you'll see here, I've not done anything in this new, the template is none, and the export file is temporary folder.
So the bizarre thing is mine said none, where yours
Yeah.
says temporary folder.
Yeah, I don't know.
And then the moment I touched the use temporary folder, it changed to what you have now.
Yeah. So maybe there's something like something cachy in your system.
Oh, it's a prior, it was a file developed in a prior to 9.x.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably what it was from. Because remember, this was like 9.5 is when this came in.
Yeah. Well, now it's kind of screwed up because now I'm stuck with the temporary folder, I guess. No, it went back to none. That's crazy.
Okay. So that's something to look at because you've got a legacy issue there, but that's not going to bother, there's backward compatibility issue opportunities there. That's not going to affect anything in your file.
Yeah,
All right.
and if
So-
you pull up a temporary folder, do you know where that temporary folder is normally located?
I think it's in the Tinderbox. Let me see. I'm going to guess. I think it's in Tinderbox real support folders.
Got it.
Yeah. No templates, scripts. I don't know where it is. We have to ask Mark.
No
I don't know.
problem. No problem.
I don't know where it is. Okay, so that addresses that issue of why that document bounced back and forth. But now you can see with that strategy of having unique file names, I'm not putting structure into my file names, and I can do all the previewing I want with the different notes. So if you look here though, and this is and again, I want to give myself flexibility in my publishing. So sometimes, for like a lot of the times, for example, I'll have in the beginning of a chapter, I may have a file called introduction, and in that file, it will say Lorem Ipsum, right? So in that file, it will say Lorem Ipsum, blah, blah, blah. But I actually don't want this to be numbered. And so what I'll do is I can turn off the numbering on the output. So I'll show you that. So if I turn off this numbering, so if I preview this note, you'll see it says 2.2.A. And in my template, if I uncheck that, is yes include numbering, if I uncheck that, the numbering goes away. So then that way in my output, I can control whether or not numbers are included or not. And the way I do that is simply in my output templates, I say, if is yes and numbering includes equal true, then do this. Include the number string plus the title, else just includes the title. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so this now brings me to what my ultimate objective was. And so the great thing about doing this when you're writing a book now, because of the CSA strategy, is separating content, structure, and appearance. I'm not stuck to like saying I wrote section 1.2, and what happens if I decide, you know what, this material that I just wrote, as great as it is, it actually belongs here. So now I can move it here, and it's actually going to get renumbered automatically for me, and I don't have to go back and manually mess around with that. So anything that can be automated in that way, I have Tinderbox do it for me. Yeah, go ahead, Art.
So net result actually is that none of these containers or notes are given a specific name unless you choose to. Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
But you don't actually have to, but it will be in the export stage.
Correct.
That those names and numbers that as you have chosen on the left side pane are applied. Okay, great, excellent.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd actually done a sort of reverse, very kludgy kind of variation on this, where I did it in the reverse manner, where I assigned a serial number to the notes in a container, and then just made the container sort by serial number, user attribute I'd created.
Yeah.
Which is cool because it then shows up within Tinderbox with a specific number or prepended to it.
Yeah, that's fine, but with mine, because of my content structure appearance methodology, I then use display attributes for the visual affordance of that numbering, so I can visually see what it is, but it's not actually affecting the name of the note.
Well, I can totally get that. Yeah, it totally makes sense, and it's better for multi-layered.
It's better for multi-layered documents, and it makes your export so much easier because now everything is an independent element that you then can construct the way you want to construct it when on demand.
You're not wasting half the day reserializing stuff once you move it around. Absolutely.
Correct. Okay. So then so now that I've got that, I now can say, well, let's say I want to start including images in my document, and I'll try to do this in 2 minutes. Or we might go a little long. Let's say I want to call images in my document. So here I've got an images folder, and here I've got a couple images. Okay. And so what I've done is I have said now, and again, remember my strategy too, is I could paste an image into a note, but I don't like landlocking my images inside of notes. I want images to be their own independent asset, which I can reuse and repopulate and move around and copy to different files. That creates a whole bunch of flexibility for me. So the attributes I use for images are path, directory, caption, label, media file name, the caption of the image. I riffed off of what Mark Anderson did with his footnoting a few months back. And I said, and I did this. I said, okay, I want an image here. And the way I want images rendered is this. Give me the image, take its media path, its media directory, its file name, make the image by, and I'm hard coding this now. Again, my files are much more nuanced. Hard coding at 400 so that when you render an image, follow its path to where that image sits on the hard drive and make it 400 width. So if I go to render that image, there's the image. If I go to render this image, there's that image. That make sense? Got it?
Yep.
Okay. So then Tinderbox has this concept called include. And so I'm gonna before I get messy, I'm going to show you this test file. So if I go include, and what do I want to include? I want to include this file. So if I go include, and to be specific, I'm going to turn off smart quotes. Include this file here. So if I do that, if I'm using the export code include and I render it, and I've got to give it the HTML templates, not a preview templates. Okay. No, sorry. HTML. All right, and what did I spell it wrong? Include. Spelled include wrong. There we go. Include. There we go. Right. So Tinderbox it's called transclusion, and it's what Ted Nelson came up with like 40 years ago. This idea that you can take a file, you can transclude the values of one note into another note. And so this is the methodology for doing inclusion. You see how I did that?
Yeah, it's very simple, and it's just within the text of the note.
Correct. So now let's automate it though. So here's the issue. I want automated figure numbering. And I want the figure numbering to be associated with the sections. So a figure here, section would be figure 1.1.1. A figure here would be figure 1.2.1. A figure here would be chapter 2, so 2.2.1, right? So I want my figure numbers to be associated to the context of the section they're in. And so how do I do that? So if you look at this line of code here, let's break it down. First, from HTML, I'm creating an anchor tag. So if I ever want to reference this in creating indexes, I just automatically drop in an ID anchor tag. And so the ID equals the name of the file. And then I say include. And so here, the include structure is, I want you to include this file. I want you to transclude an image with this file name. And then the second argument is, I want you to apply this template when you're doing that. And then the final thing, and this is the new little trick that Mark Anderson helped me out with, is this macro do command. And the macro do command says, go run the macro add figure label and take the value of the image's file name. And then I've got this temporary temp thing that I won't explain just yet. So let me show you what the macro do command does. So the macro do command is here. And so I'm doing a little bit of code, and I'll just read it real quick. Make this, get me the ID of this particular note, grab the section number of this particular note, create the section ID number, create the section string, find the figure number, count the figures. So basically, once you found the figure number, then I also want you to add one to the figure count. And then I want you to then produce some HTML that basically says, insert the word figure, insert the value of the number section string of the figure number, and then the caption from this. And when you're doing this, when you're doing macros, this $1, $2, if you're looking at the arguments, $0 in a macro is the name of the macro. $1 is the second argument. So argument 1, comma, argument 2, comma, argument 3, comma. So the second argument is $1. So I'm saying what I want you to do is get me the caption number of $1. Well, what is $1? It's the name of this file, of this note. So in other words, what I'm telling Tinderbox is, go get me the caption number, or the caption for the note named this. So now if you see what I've done here, then I've basically told Tinderbox, create me an HTML anchor tag, create me an include that grabs and transcludes the image here. And then what I want you to do is apply the add figure labeling macro, which increments the figure numbering to that particular image. And so now so then if I go ahead and let me reset that section. So if I go ahead and reset that section and now I preview it, you'll see I'm getting the figure number is automatically getting generated. Figure 1.1.1 fivefold path of sovereignty. Figure 1.1.2 connected individual hierarchy of needs. Yeah, Art.
Yeah, this is really powerful. But one second, you said macro. What do you mean by macro?
So Tinderbox has it's old Tinderbox. Tinderbox has a concept called macros. And
Okay.
macros are a lot like a function. And the way you call macros, it's another way of calling action code in Tinderbox.
Yeah.
And so essentially what I'm saying is, hey, Tinderbox, I want you to do something. I want you to do a macro called add figure label.
Okay.
Right? And so before there was export code, before there was only export code, and the export code came before action code. So action code was macros were the old way to run action code in templates.
Huh.
And you can use macros in the context here because I want the export code to be generating this, be doing this function at this very specific point in the file, not generally within a template, but right here. Increment this figure number and then stick in the code.
So if Tinderbox sees in the text the
Caret do.
And only if it is in preview mode, right?
Yes.
Not if it's in text mode. So
Yeah.
only if it is in preview mode, suddenly it kicks into action and it runs that macro.
Correct.
Huh.
So it's a way for you to trigger inline, in context, very specific pointed action code.
And so, and it only applies to the exported content. It doesn't, because the way of where you have set it up, because all
Yeah,
of
the way
the
I've set it up, it's not changing any of the other file notes and attributes.
Sure.
It's not doing anything to any of the notes. It's just producing that numbering schema for me.
Right, you're generating a bunch of variables, you're utilizing them, you're spitting it out into the exported file, not even into
Correct.
Tinderbox itself.
Correct.
Oh, it cleans itself up. Beautiful. Yeah.
Okay. Now, there's a couple contextual things that I need though. Is part of my function is saying, go get me, start incrementing my figure numbering, right? So how do I know? How does Tinderbox know is if this is figure 1 or figure 2? It doesn't. And so if you go to my section here, you'll see that in my export code, you'll see what I'm doing down here is when I render a section, I say set your figure count to 1 and 2. Figure count to 1. So that resets the figure counting for this section to 1. So when I actually go to run it, it says go get me the figure count for the first figure count for the section. And then change the figure count, take figure number plus 1. So take my number and then add 1 to it. So that gives the increment. So within the section, the next time it sees another do, it's going to look up at the section and say, oh, my current count is 2. Oh, now my current count is 3.
So in section 3, you'll have it a +2. In section 4, you'll have a +3.
No, in section 3, it would be another +1 because they're only leaving their context.
Oh, 20. Right.
Right?
Okay.
Because, and so in other words, let me show you the implications. And this is where you need to understand your workflows. So if you'll see here now, when I redo this code, it's now, it's section 1.1.1. And then if I redo it, it's now section 1.1.2. And if I redo it, it's now section 1.1.3. Because the function, the macro is doing exactly what I'm telling it to do. Render this image and increment the figure numbering. Right? But I don't care what I'm writing because in this context, it doesn't need to be correct. It only needs to be correct when I'm exporting out the final file. When I export out the final file, I go reset the section to 1.
Yeah.
And then when I reset the section to 1, the numbering's correct.
Correct again. Okay. Wow, fantastic. It's very dynamic documents. I mean, so it does help to bug proof them completely when you're done.
Yeah. Yeah, there'll still be some editing, there'll be still some little tweaks, like I might have not reset the figure number. But if I did that, think about that. If I export out the file, I'm like, ah shit, I forgot to reset the section numbers.
Oh yeah.
And I just go reset the section numbers and I export it again.
Yeah, what's the loss? What's the cost?
It was an extra 5 minutes versus 3 hours of having to manually move it around and adjust and all that.
Very true. I think you've done a huge amount of work in the realm of publishing content out of Tinderbox. Yeah, it's a real tragedy in the sense that you had to sort of stop when you were doing the your thesis, huh?
Not really, because it's that is the bane of collaboration with others. You end up defaulting to the lowest common denominator tool within your collaboration group. Right? So like if everyone's using Tinderbox, and I found ways to collaborate with people with Tinderbox files where we can copy and notes back and forth between our individual files. It's a little bit of a manual friction kludge, but that manual friction actually is really good because it also it helps us, like, I worked on this, you worked on that. Do we really want to merge this or not? Do I agree with what you wrote or not? So so what I figured out is you each have your own individual like dev files, and then you maintain a single master Tinderbox file, and you copy your code into that master file.
True. But the area of my life when I was working on a lot of like sort of group programming projects, they involved a lot of unity when it comes to taking individual content, but then actually when you're putting it into the destination document, even though you might have multiple contributors, but you still have the components are unique, but then there's a common shell, a document shell, or
and so that what I found is, like, at the end of the day too, the way when you really get to the final publishing stage, it tends to be one person as the heavy lift to pull it all together.
Right, and so that's how it worked out, which was great, actually. Great that it did work
Right.
out.
And so that's what I found that I can do with Tinderbox, and it works out great as long as all of the authors are using Tinderbox. Where it gets frustrating is when someone's doing their work in Google Docs or Word, and I'm doing my work in Tinderbox, and it's, you know, and then we're not getting the affordances of like common universal glossaries, common user, you know, figure libraries, common reusable assets. You know, and they're sitting there, you know, putting the documents into Google Drive or into Word and landlocking the content and structure and appearance all together, and just honestly just making more work.
Yeah. So you just tell people to do their component stuff and then send it to, and then you're the assembler essentially. And
Yeah, I mean, ideally, but the problem, but at the end of the day, that, and Mark Anderson and I talk about this often. There's this issue of it's somebody else's job.
Got it.
You know, a lot of the times when you're doing that kind of documentation in Tinderbox, well, I'm not going to worry about the numbering schema because somebody else will do that. Or I'm not going to worry about the editing process because somebody else will do that. But when you're that somebody else,
Yeah.
automating this kind of stuff in Tinderbox so you don't have to do it later is just enormously helpful. Not to mention the fact that you're creating reusable assets for yourself.
Indeed.
So the problem with the old school model is you're not creating reusable assets, and you're ultimately making more work for yourself down the road because you're going to be constantly duplicating effort.
Good point. Good point. Great. This is excellent. Cool. Oh yeah, we've gone way over. Actually,
I'm sorry.
I said we've gone over and actually had to leave.
Yeah. No worries. I'm done too. But
Very
that's the idea. And there's a little, obviously there's a little more nuances to all of this, but this process works. It's fantastic.
I love it. Yeah. I'm definitely going to dig into this because I'll actually try to refactor that document in which I'd done it the reverse way, and do it this way. Let's see. It should be fun.
Yeah. All right.
Excellent. Thank
Yay.
you. Okay,
See you
guys.
later.
See you
Bye,
next
guys.
week. Thank you.